In the early morning hush of Central Park, where the air still clung to the last breath of night, and only the occasional jogger passed by, a small boy sat quietly on a bench. His name was Eli Turner. He was 9 years old and had already learned more about the world than most kids twice his age. His jeans were too short. His sneakers had holes near the toes, and the sleeves of his faded hoodie were frayed from constant wear. Yet, he sat with a kind of calm most people mistook for peace, though it was more the result of exhaustion than anything else. Eli clutched a crumpled brown paper bag in both hands like it held treasure. Inside was a single peanut butter sandwich, made the night before at a church shelter that sometimes gave him a place to wash up. He never knew if the shelter would have space the next day, or if someone would chase him off the subway grates where he tried to sleep when the nights grew cold. But for now, in this moment, he had food, he had quiet, and he had the bench, his bench, tucked near a path by the trees where tourists didn't usually go. Every morning, Eli made the same walk from the edge of the city toward the park, nodding politely at the garbage collectors, the early rising dog walkers, and a deli owner who once gave him a hot chocolate when the temperature dropped below freezing. No one knew much about Eli, and he didn't tell much either. It was easier that way, safer. Still, he was known by his presence. The small boy who smiled at everyone, who never begged loudly or chased anyone down, who didn't ask for money or pity. Instead, Eli told stories. To himself mostly, but sometimes the squirrels or the strangers who sat beside him for a moment and didn't mind listening. He spoke of a mother who once sang along to every song on the radio, a small apartment filled with laughter and broken furniture, and a life that now felt like it belonged to someone else. Eli didn't talk about the day his mother disappeared. He didn't talk about what happened after the social workers came, or why he stopped going to school, or why the shelter workers sometimes gave him the look adults give when they're about to say, "We're sorry, but don't." All of that lived behind his eyes, too deep for words. What he had now was the bench, the sandwich, and the stories that kept his memory alive. The sun was beginning to rise fully now, casting warm light through the trees. Eli squinted toward the sky, holding the paper bag up against the light, as if the sun might reveal something new inside. "Still here," he whispered, almost like a prayer. He wasn't talking to anyone. Or maybe he was. Sometimes he wasn't sure. He leaned back, resting his small frame against the wood slats. The bench creaked under his weight, familiar and forgiving. It had held him through rainstorms and restless nights, during meals and moments of hope. In his mind, the bench had a name, not one he'd ever said aloud, but something soft and comforting, like home. He imagined it had a personality, too, one that kept him company when the nights got too loud in his head. A squirrel darted past his feet, bold and fast. Eli chuckled. "Not today, little guy. This one's mine." The sandwich was always the same. White bread, sticky peanut butter, sometimes with a smear of jelly if the church had extra. But he never complained. It was food and it was his. He looked around, watching the park slowly wake up. A couple passed by holding hands, speaking in hushed tones. A woman jogged by, her earbuds in, unaware of the world around her. A pigeon flapped awkwardly onto the path, pecking at invisible crumbs. Life moved on, indifferent to the boy on the bench. But Eli stayed still. He wasn't waiting for anything. He didn't expect miracles. He had stopped believing in those a long time ago. What he did believe in was moments, small, quiet moments like this where he felt like part of something, even if only for a little while. He reached into the bag and pulled out the sandwich. The bread was slightly squished, but still whole. He considered eating half now, saving the rest for later, like he usually did. But something about this morning felt different. He couldn't say why, just different, like the world was holding its breath. As he unwrapped the sandwich, he caught sight of someone approaching the bench. A tall man, walking slowly, wearing a dark coat over what looked like a business suit. Eli noticed the shine of the shoes first, the kind that never stepped in mud, then the briefcase hanging limp from one hand. The man looked out of place, like someone had taken a person from a boardroom and dropped him into a world he didn't belong to. Eli watched quietly, sandwich paused halfway to his mouth. The man didn't seem to notice him. He sat down heavily on the opposite end of the bench, head bowed, both hands covering his face. And then, to Eli's surprise, the man began to cry. Not the quiet, hold it in kind of crying adults usually did when they thought no one was looking. This was full, open, unguarded sobbing, the kind that made shoulders shake and breath stutter. The man's body curled on itself like he was trying to disappear into his own coat. Eli froze. He had seen people cry before, other kids, parents fighting, even once a police officer late at night. But this man, dressed like someone from the world Eli used to know, crying on his bench, that was something else, something strange. He looked down at the sandwich in his hand, then at the man again, then back at the sandwich. And for a reason he couldn't quite explain, Eli didn't take a bite. Instead, he just sat there, sandwich in hand, heart quietly thudding, watching a man who looked like he had everything lose something invisible right in front of him. And Eli didn't know it yet, but that moment, that silent hesitation, was the beginning of something that would change both of their lives forever. Eli didn't speak right away. He stayed where he was, his fingers still gripping the half-wrapped sandwich, eyes fixed on the man beside him. The park felt unusually still, as if it, too, was listening. Somewhere far off, a dog barked and a bell chimed from a passing cyclist. But near the bench, time slowed. The man's sobs, though quieter now, still came in waves. Eli could hear the sharp inhales, the sudden catches in his throat, the desperate attempts to pull himself together. It was strange to see a man like that, dressed like a lawyer or a news anchor, unraveling in such a public place. Eli had learned how people usually kept their feelings hidden, especially grown-ups. They wore their smiles like armor. But this man didn't have his armor on today. He had taken it off and left it somewhere Eli couldn't see. Without thinking much more, Eli turned slightly toward him. "Hey!" he said softly, not sure if the man would hear him. The man's head lifted just enough to glance sideways, but he didn't speak. His eyes were red, his jaw clenched. His cheeks were streaked with tears that caught the morning light. He looked more confused and surprised to see a child beside him. He blinked, as if checking to see whether Eli was real. "I can go if you want," Eli added quickly, mistaking the look for discomfort. "This is just where I sit sometimes. I didn't mean to bother you." The man finally shook his head, his voice gravelly when it came. "No, you're not bothering me." Eli gave a slight nod and looked forward again, staring at the path winding through the park. A couple of runners passed by, neither of them noticing the two very different figures sharing a bench, one in a fine suit and leather shoes, the other in threadbare clothes and two big sneakers. A long moment passed. Then Eli held out the brown bag, now with the sandwich half unwrapped inside. "You hungry?" he asked. "It's peanut butter. I think. I haven't looked yet." The man looked down at the offering, his expression unreadable. For a few seconds, he didn't move. Eli kept holding it out, arm extended but not insistent. The man glanced at the bag, then back at Eli, and finally took it, slowly, as if touching something sacred. "You're offering me your food?" he asked, his voice low and almost disbelieving. Eli shrugged. "You look like you need it more than I do today." The man stared at the sandwich for a while before speaking again. "What's your name, kid?" "Eli. Yours?" He hesitated. William Hart." Eli gave a nod, as if that meant something to him, though it didn't. "Okay." William didn't take a bite right away. He just held the sandwich in both hands, staring at it as though it were something delicate and rare. He was still breathing heavily, but the raw edge of his sobs had softened. "Why would you do that?" he asked after a minute. "Give your food to someone like me?" Eli leaned back against the bench, swinging his legs slightly above the ground. "Because even rich people cry," he said simply. "And hungry isn't just about food, right?" The word struck William like a stone to the chest. His lips parted slightly, stunned by the strange clarity of a child's logic. He let out a breath that might have been a laugh or might have been another attempt not to cry. Eli wasn't looking at him anymore. He was watching a pigeon bob his way across the path, pausing now and then to peck at invisible crumbs. His face was calm, not proud or expecting anything in return. The gesture wasn't performative. It was instinctive, and that made it all the more powerful. William lowered his head, not in shame, but in reflection. "You don't know who I am, do you?" he asked. Eli turned his head slightly. "You said your name's William." "That's all." Eli shrugged again. "I don't really keep up with names. Just faces." William looked at him, and for the first time since their exchange began, he smiled, just a little. It was weak and shaky, but it was there. "I used to think I was somebody important," William said quietly. "I ran a company, made a lot of money. People listened when I spoke. Now I can't even get through a conversation with my own reflection." Eli turned his full attention to him now. "Why not?" William's eyes filled again, but the tears didn't fall this time. "Because I lost everything. And when you lose everything, the mirror shows you someone you don't recognize anymore." Eli nodded slowly, understanding more than he let on. "I used to have stuff too," he said. "My mom used to sing while cooking. We had this couch with stuffing coming out the side. I thought it was the best couch in the world." William didn't respond right away. He was trying to piece together how a kid like Eli, clearly homeless, clearly surviving on scraps, could still talk about his past with so much softness. There was no bitterness in his tone, no edge, just memories, kept warm despite the cold reality. "You ever think about going back?" William asked suddenly. Eli's face stiffened for the first time. "I can't," he said. "My mom, she left one day and didn't come back. I waited. I really did. But I think maybe she's not okay." The silence that followed was heavy, but not uncomfortable. William looked down at the sandwich again, still untouched. "You can eat it," Eli said. "I'm not going to take it back." William laughed, just a breath of air through his nose. "Thank you," he said, and then finally took a small bite. It was dry, sticky, basic, but in that moment, it tasted like the most sincere thing he consumed in years. He chewed slowly, letting the flavor sit, not because it was particularly good, but because it was real, offered freely, without agenda or pity. They sat in silence for a while after that, the kind that speaks volumes without a single word. A breeze passed through the trees above, rustling the leaves. A plastic bag skittered across the sidewalk. Life, in all its random noise, continued. Then William said, "This isn't where I planned to be today. I had other thoughts. Dark ones." Eli didn't flinch. "Yeah, I've had those too." William turned toward him, surprised again. "Really? Sometimes events by the station get real loud at night. Makes it hard to think good thoughts. But if you breathe real slow and count backward, it helps. Mostly." William stared at him. A boy, not yet 10, giving him survival tips for his own mind. It should have felt absurd. Instead, it felt like truth. "I came here thinking I might not leave," William admitted. "I didn't come to work things out. I came to give up." Eli looked down, kicking a pebble lightly with the toe of his shoe. "So what stopped you?" William gave a half smile, gesturing at the sandwich. "This, you." A small moment that didn't make sense, but also made everything make sense. They sat for another few minutes, neither rushing to leave. Eli eventually stood up, stretching his arms overhead. He looked down at William and said, "I should go find some water, but you can stay here if you want. It's a good bench." William looked up at him, eyes misty again. "Will I see you again?" Eli smiled. "Probably. I hang around. You just gotta look in the quiet corners." And with that, the boy with the peanut butter sandwich walked away, leaving behind a man who had arrived at the edge of despair and now found himself staring at the edge of something else entirely. Hope. William Hart remained on the bench long after Eli disappeared around the corner. He sat with a sandwich resting in his lap, the edges of the paper bag fluttering slightly in the breeze. His mind, usually crowded with numbers, strategies, and headlines, was oddly quiet now. The crying had stopped. The shame had dulled. What remained was something unfamiliar, something like clarity. He looked down at the half-eaten sandwich and blinked hard, as though trying to reset his focus. That child had offered him more than food. Eli had extended something intangible, yet deeply real, dignity. William hadn't realized how starved he was for that until the boy handed it to him. Casually and without judgment, the street noise began to swell as the park filled with more people. William blinked back into the moment and realized he couldn't sit there forever. He stood slowly, pocketed the rest of the sandwich, and walked in the opposite direction of where Eli had gone, not out of disinterest, but because he needed space to think. For the first time in weeks, his mind wasn't spiraling. It was rearranging itself, recalibrating. Hours passed before William found himself inside his penthouse again. The silence of the space almost oppressive. The apartment was pristine, untouched, as though frozen in time. Chrome fixtures gleamed, windows stretched from floor to ceiling, and the city pulsed below. But none of it felt real anymore. None of it felt earned. He placed the sandwich gently on the marble countertop, then moved to the living room where a thick envelope sat on the coffee table. It had arrived 2 days earlier, delivered by hand from the law firm managing his company's fall from grace. Inside were documents, formal statements, offers for settlements, and a summary of the charges under federal investigation. His co-founder had vanished with millions. Hart was left with reputational ash and a name that trended online for all the wrong reasons. He didn't open the envelope again. Instead, he stared at the untouched documents, then back at the sandwich. And slowly, something hardened in him, not bitterness, but resolve. He didn't want to disappear. Not anymore. That evening, he returned to the park. He arrived earlier than before, pacing near the bench, eyes scanning every passerby. The air was warmer now, and the crowds thicker. Tourists, locals, and performers moved through the space, each living their own narratives. But no small boy with tattered shoes and a paper bag. William returned the next morning. And the next. Each day, he brought a wrapped sandwich, just in case. Peanut butter, no jelly. He remembered that Eli hadn't seemed surprised by its simplicity. On the fourth day, just after sunrise, William finally saw him again. Eli was kneeling near a trash can, carefully sorting through bottles and cans, placing the cleanest ones in a small plastic bag. He didn't look up right away. William hesitated, unsure of how to approach, then finally cleared his throat. "I think you dropped this," he said, holding out the wrapped sandwich. Eli turned, looked up, and blinked. A slow grin crept across his face. "You again," he said. William nodded. "You said you hang around." "I do, just not always in the same spot." Eli took the sandwich and examined it. "Peanut butter," he said. "Good guess." "I remembered." They stood there for a moment. Then Eli motioned toward a different bench, this one close to the walkway but half shaded by a large oak tree. They sat. The morning air smelled faintly of grass and asphalt, and the city buzzed in the distance like a sleeping machine starting to wake. "I looked for you," William said. Eli shrugged. "People usually don't. I'm not like most people." Eli smirked. "Yeah, you're sadder." That caught William off guard. He laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was true. "I guess I am." "But you're better than a few days ago," Eli said, unwrapping the sandwich. "Your face doesn't look like it's breaking anymore." William nodded, surprised by how accurate that observation felt. "You were right, by the way, about purpose, about forgetting who I was." Eli chewed quietly for a moment, then said, "So, what now? You gonna go back to your office towers and fancy meetings?" William shook his head. "No, that part of my life is over." Or maybe pause indefinitely. Eli looked at him, eyes squinting in the sunlight. "You scared?" "A little," William admitted, "but also not really. Not like I was." Eli nodded, then said, "I think being scared is normal. I get scared when the weather changes fast. Sometimes I wake up, and I don't remember where I am. But I think if you're still breathing, you've still got moves left." William smiled. "You're full of strange wisdom, you know that?" Eli shrugged again. "I watch a lot. You learn stuff." There was a long pause. Then William spoke again. "Can I ask where you go at night?" Eli hesitated, then nodded toward the north, behind the 86th Street station. "There's a spot near the vents. Warm air comes up through the grates. Not the safest, but warmer than the streets." William felt the words settle in his chest like stones. He tried to imagine what it must be like, 9 years old, navigating New York without a home, finding warmth in vented air. It made all his past struggles feel grotesquely artificial by comparison. "You shouldn't have to live like that," he said quietly. Eli didn't flinch. "Yeah, well, she doesn't do much out here." William looked at him for a long time, then said, "I want to help you. Not in a weird way. Just, I don't think it's right for you to be out here alone." Eli looked at him cautiously. "I'm used to people saying that, then disappearing. I'm not going to disappear." "You might." "I won't," William said firmly. "But I won't make promises I can't keep. I just want to start with something small." Eli studied him, his sandwich forgotten in his lap. "Like what?" "I don't know yet," William said honestly. "A meal, a place to rest, someone to check in with. I can't erase everything that happened to you, but I can be someone who shows up." Eli's eyes narrowed slightly, but he didn't reject the offer. He just looked away for a moment, considering it. "I'll think about it," he said finally. William nodded. "That's fair." They sat in silence again, but this time it was companionable. The wind stirred the leaves above them, and somewhere nearby, a saxophone player began warming up. Before leaving, William reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small business card. On it was his name and a number handwritten in pen. "I know you probably don't have a phone," he said, handing it to Eli. "But if you ever do, or if you meet someone who does, call me anytime." Eli took it, turned it over in his fingers, then tucked it into his hoodie pocket like a treasure. "Okay," he said. "Maybe." William stood. "I'll be around. Same bench. Mornings." Eli watched him go, the sandwich now finished, the card warm in his pocket. That night, William didn't return to his penthouse feeling defeated. He didn't scroll through news stories about his company or drink to silence his thoughts. Instead, he opened a blank document on his laptop and began to write. Not a statement to press, not a letter to his investors, but a story about a boy with nothing who offered everything. He didn't know where it would lead yet, but it felt like the beginning of something true. The next morning came with a soft drizzle misting over the city. New York had a way of looking both majestic and miserable in the rain, especially early, before the crowds came in full force and the sidewalks turned to chaos. But Eli didn't seem to mind. He liked the rain. It made the streets quieter, and the softer noise gave his thoughts room to breathe. He stood under a maple tree on the edge of Central Park, its leaves catching droplets that slid down like tiny glass beads. The ground was damp, but he was used to that by now. He glanced over the bench, their bench, and saw it empty. For a brief second, a flicker of disappointment moved through him, but he crushed it before it could grow. He wasn't the kind of kid who got his hopes up. Not anymore. People came and went. Promises were often made in the warm light of emotion and broken in the cold wind of real life. He knew how that worked. But then, through the veil of light rain, he saw the familiar silhouette approaching from the path. A tall figure in a long coat, hands in his pockets, head slightly down as if in thought. William Hart wasn't carrying a briefcase. He wasn't dressed like a titan of business. Today, he wore something simpler, a gray hoodie under the coat, jeans, sneakers that had clearly seen a few city streets. He looked less like a billionaire and more like someone learning how to be human again. Eli walked toward the bench and sat down just as William arrived. "I brought 2 sandwiches today," William said without ceremony. "One's turkey, the other's peanut butter. Dealer's choice." Eli raised an eyebrow. "Turkey sounds fancy." William handed it over and sat beside him. Neither said anything for a moment. They just listened to the rain tapping gently on the leaves above, the occasional hum of tires slicing through wet pavement nearby. Eli unwrapped the sandwich and took a bite. It was fresher than anything he usually ate, and he took his time chewing, tasting each part. After a few bites, he spoke, without looking at William. "So, William Hart, huh?" William turned slightly. "You heard the name before?" "Maybe," Eli said, wiping his mouth on his sleeve. "After you left, I asked someone at the church about it. A guy named Rico has a phone with news alerts. Said you used to be the guy on magazine covers. Rich, smart, some company with a name I didn't understand." William let out a breath through his nose. "Yeah, that was me." Eli chewed quietly for another few seconds, then asked, "So, what happened?" William didn't answer right away. He rubbed his hands together, watching the rain fall in thin streaks beyond the trees. "I trusted the wrong person," he said at last. "My co-founder. We started our company in a garage, built it from nothing. It became big, fast. Too fast, maybe. Somewhere along the way, the numbers got manipulated. Documents were signed without my knowledge. When the investigation started, he vanished. I was left holding the wreckage." Eli nodded, as if he'd heard similar stories before. "People ever believe you didn't know?" "Some did. Most didn't. And honestly, I stopped caring after a while. The company was everything to me. It wasn't just a job. It was where I poured my identity. When that collapsed, so did I." "You miss it?" Eli asked. William paused. "No, I miss who I was before I let it define me." They both fell into silence again. This time, it wasn't heavy. It was thoughtful. Eli reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. Carefully, he unfolded it, revealing a small drawing, done in pencil and faint blue crayon. It was a crude sketch of the bench. 2 stick figures on it, one larger with a square watch, the other smaller, holding something that looked like a sandwich. "I drew this last night," Eli said, passing it over. "Hope it's okay." William took the drawing and stared at it. He didn't speak. His throat tightened. He traced the shapes with his eyes, the childlike lines, the strange simplicity. It was more meaningful than any portrait ever commissioned of him, more honest than any profile ever written. "This is beautiful," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Eli shrugged. "It's just a doodle." "No, it's not." William folded the drawing carefully and slid it into the inner pocket of his coat, like it was made of gold. Then, after a long pause, he asked, "How long have you been out here?" Eli looked away. 6 months, I think. Could be longer. Hard to track time when you don't have a calendar. William's jaw tensed, but he stayed quiet. "It happened fast," Eli continued. "One day we had a place. Mom was working 2 jobs, always tired. Then she got sick. Real sick. We didn't have papers for the hospital. And she didn't trust the system. One morning, I woke up and she was gone. No note. No nothing. I waited for her to come back. Slept by the door for days." William closed his eyes. "I'm sorry." "Yeah, me too." They didn't speak for several minutes. Then William asked, "You ever go looking for her?" Eli nodded. "Every day. I check faces in crowds. Hospitals. Shelters. I think maybe she left because she thought it was safer for me. Or maybe she thought she wouldn't make it. I don't know. But I think about her all the time." William reached into his coat again and pulled out a small notebook, flipping through pages of notes and scribbles. He tore one out, wrote something down, and handed it to Eli. "My phone number. Real one this time. It goes straight to me. I don't have assistants anymore." Eli took it, folded it carefully, and tucked it inside his hoodie. William continued, "I want to help you find her, if you'll let me." Eli looked down at his shoes. "Why?" "Because I've spent too long trying to save companies, and not nearly enough time trying to save people. And because I owe you something more than just sandwiches." Eli didn't respond right away. He picked up a stick from the ground and began drawing shapes in the wet dirt with it. Circles, lines, a sun with rays stretching wide. "I don't know if she's out there," he said finally. "But if she is, yeah, I want to find her." William nodded solemnly. "Then we'll start there." They sat together until the rain stopped and the sun began to peek through the gray. William stood first, stretching his legs. "I have to go make a few calls," he said, "but I'll be back tomorrow. Same time." Eli gave a slight nod. "And Eli," William said as he turned, "you may not know it yet, but you're changing my life." Eli smiled, not in a proud way, but in the way someone does when they know something good is just beginning, even if they don't understand it all yet. "See you tomorrow, Mr. Hart." "Just William," he replied, and then he walked away, the city swallowing him once again, while Eli sat back on the bench and watched the clouds break open just enough to let the light come through. 2 days passed before William returned to the park. Not because he'd forgotten, but because something had shifted. The night after his last conversation with Eli, he stayed up late making calls, quiet, discreet calls to people who still took his name seriously, even if the public didn't anymore. He didn't ask for favors. He asked for access. Old contacts from tech circles, private investigators, charity board members, even a hospital director. He wasn't sure what he was building, but he knew what he was looking for. Something real. A place to begin again. A reason. By the time he returned to the bench, Eli was already there, legs crossed, flipping through a book that looked like it had been rescued from a trash bin. The cover was bent, the pages yellowed. William recognized it instantly. Treasure Island. Classic choice, William said as he approached. Eli didn't look up right away. "You're late," he muttered. "I came yesterday." William took the seat beside him and exhaled. "I know. I was working on something." Eli closed the book slowly and looked at him. "Important?" "Yeah," William replied. "You." Eli tilted his head, skeptical. "You say that like it's a business pitch." "It's not," William said. "But I've been thinking about everything. About you. About how all the systems I trusted, business, government, media, they all fell apart. And yet, somehow, a 9-year-old with nothing still managed to offer more humanity than anyone I've met in years." Eli shrugged, uncomfortable with the weight of that sentence. "I started writing again," William added. Eli perked up slightly. "Writing what?" "Not business plans," William said. "Stories. About that first day. About you. About what it means to lose everything and find something better in the rubble." Eli looked down at the book in his lap, tracing the edge with his finger. "What if you write all that and people still don't believe it?" "Then they don't," William replied. "But maybe someone will. Maybe the right person." They sat in silence for a moment, listening to the sound of city, buses groaning in the distance, and the occasional bark of a dog chasing pigeons across the path. William glanced sideways at the boy. "I made a few calls," he said carefully. "I didn't mention your name, just your description. There's a woman who works at a homeless shelter in Brooklyn. Said she remembers a woman who matches your mom's look. Showed up sick, used a false name, disappeared before they could do intake." Eli's head snapped around. "When?" "About 6 months ago. Around the time you said she left." Eli blinked, holding very still. "What's the name?" "Doesn't matter. It was fake. But the shelter has a CCTV camera by the back alley. I'm trying to get access to the footage." Eli's breathing quickened slightly. "And if it's her?" William placed a hand gently on the bench between them, not touching Eli but anchoring his voice. "Then we'll find her." A long silence followed. Eli looked forward again, his jaw clenched. "What if she left on purpose?" William didn't answer right away. "Then we'll deal with that together." The words hung between them like a fragile thread. But Eli didn't pull away. He just nodded once, as if accepting a contract he hadn't signed but somehow already trusted. After a few minutes, William pulled out his phone. "Want to see something weird?" Eli leaned over slightly as William pulled up a search engine and typed in his own name. Dozens of results appeared. Articles, photos, videos. Headlines with words like visionary, disgraced, fraud, collapse, billion-dollar empire, and mystery. "That's you?" Eli asked. "That's who I was," William replied. "Or who people thought I was. Now, I don't know. I'm still figuring it out." Eli scrolled through a few pictures. "You look tired in these." William said, "I was building something I thought mattered. Turns out it didn't. At least, not in the way I hoped." Eli looked up at him. "You still have money?" "A little," William said. "Not as much as I used to. The government froze most of my accounts during the investigation. I still have access to personal savings. Enough to live. Enough to help someone else live too." Eli frowned. "You're not trying to adopt me or something, right?" William laughed softly. "No, I'm not here to play savior. I'm here because I need something real to hold on to. And because you gave me food when I had nothing left. I had nothing too, Eli reminded him. That's what makes it matter. They sat in the quiet again, but this time the mood was different, less guarded. Eli leaned back on the bench and stretched his legs. You know the squirrels in this park are psychopaths, right? He said casually. William chuckled. I've noticed. One of them tried to steal my sandwich yesterday. I threw a pebble at it and it just stared at me, like it was planning revenge. I'll keep an eye out, William said. Maybe it's organizing a coup. Eli grinned. The weight between them lessened, if only slightly. A breeze stirred the leaves above their heads. Hey, Eli said after a while, if you could build anything again, not a company, not a business, but something that helps people, what would it be? William stared forward, thoughtful. I think I'd build something for kids like you, people who fall through the cracks, not just to feed them or give them beds, but to listen, really listen, to remind them they exist. Eli nodded slowly. That'd be cool. You'd help me build it? William asked. I don't know anything about building stuff. You know more than you think. You know what it feels like to be forgotten. That's something most people in power never understand. Eli considered this. Yeah, he said finally. I'd help. William smiled. Then it's a deal. They shook hands, awkwardly but sincerely. A real agreement between two people the world had no idea were forming a partnership that could outlast headlines or stock reports. As the afternoon wore on, they walked together to a corner deli. William bought Eli a warm meal, mac and cheese, an apple, and a soda. They sat at the window bar, watching people rush by outside, unaware that something small but seismic had just begun. Later, as they parted ways, William stopped Eli before he crossed the street. Same bench tomorrow, he asked. Yeah, Eli replied, unless the squirrel declares war. And with that, he disappeared into the crowd, the same way he always did, quiet, light-footed, like a ghost who'd learned how to survive among the living. But this time, he left something behind. Hope. And William Hart, once a man of noise and notoriety, stood still on the sidewalk, holding nothing but a receipt and the first real sense of purpose he'd felt in years. The following week was full of unspoken anticipation. Every morning, William arrived at the park earlier than usual, often before the sun had fully risen, hoping Eli would show up just a few minutes earlier than the day before. Sometimes he did, sometimes he didn't. But even in the boy's absence, the bench had changed. It wasn't just a bench anymore. It was a point of contact, a place where something honest had begun. By midweek, William had secured the footage from the Brooklyn shelter. He hadn't told Eli yet. He wanted to be certain before giving the boy hope. After combing through hours of silent black and white video, he saw her, a woman in a heavy coat, hood up, hunched over with exhaustion. She looked around nervously, helped inside by a volunteer, then disappeared down the hallway. 2 hours later, she slipped out the back exit. No name left, no record, but it was her. William was almost certain of it. The resemblance to Eli was striking. The same eyes, same bone structure, the same way she carried grief like it was sewn into her skin. He was still trying to track what happened after that. That Friday, he found Eli waiting for him on the bench, swinging his legs over the side like a metronome. The boy looked thinner than usual, and there was a bruise on his wrist. Faint, yellowed at the edges, but noticeable. William didn't say anything about it immediately. He sat down, offered a sandwich, this time ham and cheese, and waited for Eli to speak. The boy unwrapped it slowly, took a bite, then chewed in silence. After a moment, he asked, "You ever lose your mind?" William raised an eyebrow. "You mean like a breakdown?" Eli nodded. "I think I almost had one last night." William leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "What happened?" Eli shrugged, but his hands trembled slightly as he held the sandwich. There was this guy, new at the station. Big, mean. Said the vents belonged to him now. Pushed me. Said I was too small to matter. Said if I came back, he'd break my face. William's jaw tensed. "Did he hurt you?" "Not really," Eli said, brushing his wrist like it was nothing. "Just scared me. I didn't sleep. I walked all night. Thought about going back to that church shelter, but I didn't want them to think I couldn't handle it. William's voice was calm but firm. You're a child, Eli. You're not supposed to handle this alone. Eli looked at him with eyes that had seen too much. But I am alone. I've been alone. Even when people act like they care, they leave. They always leave. William didn't respond right away. He stared at the ground, his breath shallow. Then he said, You know what's crazy? I had everything. Money, power, rooms full of people calling me a genius. But I was more alone than you can imagine, because none of them knew me. Not really. And the moment things went bad, they vanished. Eli looked at him, the bite of sandwich still in his hand, uneaten. So why didn't you just leave? Disappear? People like you, they can go live on a yacht or an island and forget everything. William gave a sad smile. Because I didn't want to live. That day you found me, I'd come to park to end it. The silence that followed was immediate and sharp. Eli turned slowly. You were gonna? William nodded once. Yeah, I had it all planned, but I didn't go through with it. Because of you. Eli stared at him. Because I gave you a sandwich? No, William said, turning to meet his eyes. Because you looked at me like I mattered. Not as a billionaire. Not as a headline. Just as a person. And I realized if a kid who's lost everything can still be kind, still see people, then I had no excuse to give up. Eli blinked quickly, turning away. He wiped his nose with his sleeve and muttered, You're not supposed to say stuff like that. Why not? Because it makes it real. I don't know how to deal with real. Most people just fake it. I'm done faking, William said. And you shouldn't have to fake it either. Eli stood up suddenly, pacing a few steps away. It's too much, he said. You keep showing up. You keep asking questions. You want to find my mom. You want to help. But what if there's nothing to find? What if she left on purpose? What if I get close and it just breaks everything worse than it already is? William stood too, slowly, giving Eli space. Then I'll be there when it breaks, and we'll figure it out. Together. The boy stopped walking. His back was turned, shoulders tight. He didn't speak for a long time. Then he said, I think I hate hope. William raised his eyebrows. Why? Because it hurts more than the truth sometimes. William nodded slowly. Yeah, it does. But it's the only thing strong enough to fight the rest. Eli finally turned back around. His face was pale, eyes rimmed red, but his voice was steady. You still think we'll find her? I think we might, William said. I saw footage from a shelter. I think it's her. She was sick, scared, but alive. Eli's lips parted, but no words came. He looked at William like he was seeing something impossible. Then, after a long moment, he sat back down on the bench and pulled his knees to his chest. Okay, he whispered. Then let's try. William sat beside him again. Not too close. Just enough. I need to ask you something, he said. Eli turned his head, wary. What? If I start something real, a project, a movement, to help other kids like you, not just food or shelters, but long-term change, would you help me build it? Eli hesitated. What would I do? Be the voice, William said. Tell your story. Help us understand what matters. What works? What doesn't? I don't want to guess. I want to get it right. Eli looked down, drawing circles in the dirt with the tip of his shoe. You'd really want someone like me involved? You're the reason it exists. Eli smiled faintly. Can I name it? William grinned. Only if you promise not to call it Squirrel Defense Force. Eli laughed, genuinely, for the first time that day. Deal. They sat there until the light shifted and the wind picked up. When it was time to go, William offered to walk Eli to the shelter. The boy agreed on one condition, no talking once they got there. William understood. Some places demanded silence, not out of shame, but to preserve safety. He walked him to the steps, then paused. You still hate hope? Eli looked up at him, then shook his head. Only a little. Fair enough. The boy slipped through the doors and vanished into the building. William stood outside for a long moment, then pulled out his phone. and typed one sentence into a blank page. The boy gave me food, but what he really gave me was my life back. Then he hit save, and for the first time in months, went home without dreading the night. By the following week, William Hart no longer visited the park out of guilt or a need for redemption. He came because he wanted to, because in a city that once celebrated his name and later tried to erase it, this place, and the boy who waited for him there, was the only part of his life that felt unshakably real. His public identity had crumbled. But here, no one cared about net worth, stock prices, or scandal. Here, he could be just a man trying to rebuild. Eli had been arriving earlier, sometimes beating William to bench. He now carried a second-hand backpack with a few essentials William had quietly purchased through a local contact: a new toothbrush, a change of clothes, a small notebook, and a wrapped snack that Eli jokingly called emergency rations. He had accepted the bag without comment, but wore it every day. That morning, the city was wrapped in a thick fog. Trees emerged like ghosts from the mist, their branches dripping with condensation. William spotted Eli sitting cross-legged on the bench, scribbling in his notebook, his expression tight with concentration. William sat down beside him and waited for the boy to finish his sentence. "What are you writing?" William asked after a moment. Eli closed the notebook slowly. "Don't laugh." "I won't." "It's a letter," Eli said, tucking it into the backpack. "To her." William didn't need to ask who her was. "Want to read it to me?" he offered gently. Eli shook his head. "Not yet. Maybe later." William nodded. "Take your time." They sat quietly for a while, the only sounds being the faint drip of water from the trees and the occasional passing jogger whose footsteps faded quickly into the mist. Then Eli turned to him with a strange look in his eyes, part curiosity, part uncertainty. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." Eli hesitated, then said, "What were you really thinking that day? You know, the day I found you crying." William took a breath. He had spoken about that morning in abstract ways, emotional collapse, despair, but not the actual thoughts that ran through his mind. Now, faced with a boy who had interrupted those thoughts with a peanut butter sandwich, he owed more than a vague answer. "I thought I was finished," William said quietly. "Not just my career. Me, I sat there trying to picture the world after I was gone. And for a few minutes, I thought maybe it would be better off." Eli didn't interrupt. He simply stared at him, eyes wide but steady. "I felt like everything I had built didn't matter. The people I thought were friends had vanished. I couldn't tell if I was the villain or the victim. And that kind of confusion, it eats you alive. And then," Eli asked, "then you spoke." Eli blinked. "I didn't say much." "You said enough," William said. "You gave me your food. You sat with me like I mattered, even when I looked like someone who had it all. You said something I keep thinking about." Eli looked puzzled. "What?" "You said, even rich people cry, and hungry isn't just about food." Eli shrugged. "Well, it's true." "It is," William agreed, "but no one had told me that in months. Not even the people I paid to fix my problems. You gave me something none of them could." Eli was quiet for a long time, processing the weight of those words. Then he said, "You think you'll ever go back to being, rich?" William chuckled. "I don't think that matters anymore. What I do know is I want to use what I still have to build something better, something honest, and I want you to be a part of it." Eli studied him. "What would I even do?" "You'd tell your story," William said, "in your own words, on your terms. You'd help shape the way we talk about kids in your position, not as cases, as people." Eli looked skeptical. "You think anyone's going to listen to me?" "I did," William said. "And if I did, others will too." Eli didn't respond immediately. He dug into the side of his backpack and pulled out a folded flyer, creased and stained from travel. It was for a missing persons hotline, the kind that ended up pinned to subway walls or public bulletin boards. He handed it to William. "Rico gave me this," he said. "He said if I ever wanted to find her for real, I'd have to call them. But I don't have a phone." William took the paper carefully, noting the faint pencil scratchings Eli had added. Dates, partial addresses, memories turned into breadcrumbs. He looked up. "I'll call," he said. "Today?" Eli nodded, then said something so soft it was almost lost in the breeze. "What if she's dead?" William looked at him, then replied, "Then we remember her. Together." The boy didn't cry. He looked like he wanted to, but he didn't. Instead, he reached into the notebook and tore out a single sheet. He handed it to William. "I changed my mind," he said. "You can read it now." William unfolded the page carefully and read the letter aloud, though his voice caught more than once. "Dear Mom, I don't know where you are. Maybe you're looking for me. Maybe you're not. Maybe you're sick. Maybe you're hiding. I don't know, but I'm still here. I haven't given up. I still eat peanut butter sandwiches. And I still talk to squirrels. You'd probably laugh at that. A man cried next to me once, and I gave him my sandwich. I didn't know who he was. Now he's my friend. He wants to help me find you. I don't know if we'll make it, but I'm trying. Love, Eli." By the time William finished, he couldn't speak. He folded the letter back up and held it in both hands, gripping it like something fragile. "I'm going to frame this," he said. Eli smirked. "It's just paper." "No," William said. "It's everything." Later that day, William made the call to the hotline. He gave him the details Eli had scribbled in the margins of the flyer. Dates, shelters, nicknames, cities. The operator on the other end listened carefully, asked a series of questions, then said, "This matches a file we flagged 2 weeks ago. We might have something." William froze. "Where?" "I can't give specifics over the phone," the woman said gently, "but someone will follow up within 72 hours. When he returned to the bench that evening, Eli wasn't there. William waited. He stayed until the park closed, but the boy never came. That night, worry crept into the space where hope had started to grow. The next morning, still no Eli, nor the morning after that. William searched the station near 86th Street. No sign. He checked shelters, asked street vendors. Nothing. Then, late on the third day, he found a small envelope tucked under the bench where they always sat. No address, no stamp, just his name. Inside, a crayon drawing of the bench again, this time one stick figure sitting alone. The other, smaller one, had an arrow pointing off the page. On the back, scribbled in red, "Still around, just waiting for you to be ready." William stared at it, heart pounding, not with fear, with understanding. He folded the paper slowly, held it to his chest, and whispered, "I am ready." Then he stood, pulled out his phone, and began to type, not another statement to press, not a pitch, not a speech. A blueprint, not for a company, but for something new, something built from a sandwich, a bench, and the words of a boy who'd refused to look away from another person's pain. It would be called Still Around, and it would change everything. William kept the drawing in his coat pocket, tucked inside a small plastic sleeve to protect it from the rain. He looked at it every day, not just to remember Eli, but to remember the promise the boy had left behind, without saying the words directly. Still around, just waiting for you to be ready. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't even a challenge. It was a signal, a line drawn in invisible ink that William now felt compelled to follow. He didn't sleep much that week. Not because he was anxious, but because he was working, really working, for the first time in months. Not for shareholders or clients or PR optics, but for something rooted in truth. His penthouse, once cold and sterile, had transformed into a command center. The white bars that once held quarterly projections now displayed lists of ideas scribbled in color markers. Direct outreach, city partnerships, street-level access, mobile shelters, honest storytelling. And circled 3 times in red, youth-led advisory. He called in a few former employees, not the ones who betrayed him, but the ones who believed in building something real. They came not because of his name, but because they had seen the footage from the podcast he'd posted 3 days prior. In the 20-minute recording, William didn't talk about his company. He didn't mention the lawsuits or his old wealth. He told a single story about a boy in Central Park, a peanut butter sandwich, and the silent offer of empathy that kept a man from disappearing entirely. The internet responded with a mixture of confusion and awe. William Hart, once a symbol of excess and corporate hubris, had reemerged with a story so humble and raw it didn't fit the narrative people expected. The clip was reshared by influencers, educators, and eventually journalists. The story went viral, but this time it wasn't about scandal. It was about a moment that had passed between two people the world normally overlooked in opposite ways: a child without a home and a man who once had too much. Within 72 hours, William was fielding calls from nonprofits, city officials, even school administrators. Everyone wanted to know more about the boy. Who was he? Was Eli real? Why hadn't they heard about him before? William refused to give any identifying details. "He's not a symbol," he said in every interview. "He's a person, and he changed me." But off camera, William was still looking for him. Every morning, he returned to the bench. He visited the 86th Street station, asked around the shelters, retraced every place Eli had ever mentioned in their conversations. It was as if the boy had vanished, deliberately keeping out of reach, watching from somewhere just far enough away to avoid being seen. Then one night, while sorting through documents on his dining room table, William found something buried in the notes he'd written weeks earlier. It was a map, a crude one, drawn by Eli the day he described how he found the vents near the station. He'd sketched it casually, not realizing he was leaving a trail. William stared at it, then grabbed his coat and ran out the door. It was nearly midnight when he arrived at the block, damp with early autumn rain. The station was mostly quiet, save for a janitor mopping near the east entrance. William approached him. "Excuse me," he said. "I'm looking for a kid. Small, 9 or 10. Peanut butter sandwiches. Talks to squirrels. You seen him?" The janitor raised an eyebrow. "You the guy from the video?" William nodded. The man leaned on his mop and thought for a second. "Yeah, I seen that kid. Keeps to himself. Real polite. Ain't seen him in a few days, though. Thought maybe someone picked him up. Hope he's okay." William sighed. "Thanks. That helps." As he turned to leave, the janitor added, "Check the old boiler rooms. There's an access point under the northeast stairs. Sometimes they go down there when they're hiding." William found a spot 15 minutes later. The gate was half bent, the stairwell leading into a dark maintenance corridor below street level. He hesitated, then stepped inside. It smelled of rust and dust, but the air was warmer, rising from unseen pipes beneath the floor. He walked slowly, his footsteps echoing against concrete. At the far end of the corridor, a small flicker of movement caught his eye. A blanket, a backpack, a crayon. He crouched beside the pile and found another drawing, tucked into the corner of a torn library book. This one showed two stick figures again, one holding a small flag that read "Ready," the other standing at a distance, smiling. William didn't call out. He just sat down beside the blanket, cross-legged, and waited. After what felt like an hour, he heard a soft shuffle behind him. "You're early," came the voice. Calm, playful, familiar. William turned. Eli stood in the shadows, his hoodie up, but his face visible. He didn't look afraid, just tired. "I was beginning to think I dreamed you," William said. Eli stepped forward. "You're not dreaming." "I read your note," William said. "You said you were waiting for me to be ready." Eli nodded. "I needed to know if you really meant it." "I do," William said. "I'm building it. Not a company. Something new. Something better. I called it Still Around. After your drawing." Eli looked down, chewing his lip. "You really gonna do it?" "Yes," William said. "But I can't do it without you." Eli didn't answer right away. He walked over to his blanket, picked up the drawing, and studied it. "People think kids like me are invisible," he said. "They give us things, sometimes. Food, clothes. But they never ask what we think." "I will," William said. "Every step." Eli looked up at him. "Even if I say stuff you don't like?" "Especially then." A long pause stretched between them. Then Eli extended his hand. "You promise you find me again," he said. "So I guess I better hold you to that." William took the hand and shook it. "Deal." They sat together in that dark hallway, surrounded by old pipes and peeling paint. It wasn't a boardroom or a press conference stage. It was quiet, humble, true, and it was where something extraordinary began, not just a nonprofit, not just a redemption story, but a partnership built not on power, but on purpose. Later that night, William walked Eli to a small transitional housing center he partnered with earlier that week. The director, a soft-spoken woman named Monica, welcomed them without asking questions. She handed Eli a key to a clean room with a real bed and a desk by the window. Before stepping inside, Eli turned to William. "You really think this changes anything?" he asked. "I know it does," William said. Eli nodded. "Then let's make it count." And with that, the boy disappeared into the room, the door closing softly behind him. William stood in the hallway for a long time, hands still resting on the drawer in his pocket. The world outside was loud, cynical, impatient. But in here, the silence meant something. It meant safety. It meant the first night Eli Turner wouldn't have to sleep wondering if the vents would stay warm. It meant a promise had finally been kept. 2 weeks after Eli moved into the transitional housing center, the story of the boy and the sandwich was no longer just an internet moment. It had become a phenomenon. News outlets, morning shows, and think pieces dissected the details of the original podcast episode William had posted. But what fascinated people the most was not William's fall from grace or his attempt to start over. It was the simplicity of the moment that started it all. A boy who had nothing offering food to a man who once had everything. Still, the identity of the boy remained a mystery. William had intentionally kept Eli's name out of every interview, every press release, and every event that followed. He refused to let the world turn Eli into a prop or a symbol. Instead, he shifted the attention towards something larger, the systemic failures that allowed thousands of children like Eli to vanish into city streets, unnoticed. The nonprofit they had envisioned together, still around, was already making waves. It began as a whisper campaign, with William using his remaining resources to seed partnerships with shelters, educators, and grassroots organizations across the country. The first pilot site opened in the Bronx, a modest but thoughtfully designed community hub that offered meals, safe sleep pods, tutoring programs, and a voice-first approach to outreach. No one was asked for identification. No one was judged. William insisted that every staff member, volunteer, and donor hear one rule. We are not here to save anyone. We are here to listen, to build trust, and to stay. The idea that someone would stay, really stay, was radical in a world so quick to move on. But with every step forward, the past tugged at William's sleeve. He had managed to shield Eli from a media storm, but he couldn't shield himself. As the story grew, so did the attention on his previous life. News networks replayed archive footage of his old interviews. Analysts re-examined the downfall of his company, once hailed as one of the most disruptive tech ventures of the decade. Visionary or villain? One headline asked. Another read, "From boardroom to park bench, the redemption arc of William Hart." A third, more thoughtful piece appeared in the Sunday editorial column. Maybe we judge him too quickly. Or maybe it took losing everything for William Hart to do the one thing he never had the courage to do before. Stop pretending. William read them all, some with bitterness, others with reluctant gratitude. He knew they were trying to make sense of his story, to fit it into some narrative arc. But the truth was messier than that. He hadn't suddenly turned into a hero. He was still angry, still ashamed, still waking up in cold sweats with the image of investor disappointment and betrayal playing on a loop in his mind. One night, he received an anonymous envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside, a single sheet of paper, a screenshot of an old group photo from a tech conference in Berlin, taken during the height of his company's success. His co-founder, Mark Tellers, stood beside him, smiling, arm over William's shoulder. Behind him, a whiteboard scribbled with projections that never came true. On the back of the photo, written in sharp black marker, were the words, "Still think you didn't know?" William's hand trembled as he held it. He hadn't seen Mark since the week before the indictments were filed. The betrayal had nearly broken him. Not just because of the fraud, but because Mark had been his best friend. They had built the company together from nothing, slept on the same floors during hackathons, shared takeout and dreams in equal measure. And then Mark had forged his name on 3 critical documents and vanished overseas, leaving William behind to face federal scrutiny. He had always maintained he didn't know what Mark was doing. The investigators found no direct evidence tying him to fraud, but the court of public opinion didn't need evidence. It needed a villain. William had worn that role without resistance. Maybe he thought he deserved it. The envelope stirred something in him, not a desire to clear his name, but a need to speak honestly and openly, to finally tell the truth without trying to shape it. So he agreed to appear on a podcast, one with a reputation for unfiltered conversations and long-form storytelling. The episode, titled The Boy, the Bench, and the Billionaire, went live within 48 hours. The host began with the expected questions. William answered them calmly, deliberately, refusing to dodge the uncomfortable parts. "Yes, I trusted the wrong people," he said. "Yes, I missed signs. No, I wasn't innocent. I wasn't malicious, but I was complicit through silence and inaction, and I paid for that. Still paying, actually." Then the host asked, "What made you come back? After all of it?" William's voice grew softer. "A kid, 9 years old, no family, no safety, gave me the only thing he had, his lunch, and not because he wanted anything. Just because I was crying, and he didn't want me to cry alone." The host was quiet for a beat, then asked, "Do you believe in redemption?" William paused. "I believe in presence," he said. "Showing up, listening, not walking away when things get hard. Redemption's too tidy a word. Life doesn't work like that. But being present, that's a choice we can make every day." When the episode aired, it reached millions, not through hype or celebrity endorsement, but through quiet shares, word of mouth, and late-night listeners who found something in William's voice that felt familiar. Vulnerability. People began writing letters. Hundreds of them. A teenager from Chicago who had aged out of foster care. A veteran who said the story reminded him of a time he almost didn't come home. A social worker who had been burned out for years, but now felt something stirring again. And then came the letter from a woman in Queens. It was addressed to Mr. Hart. Inside, just 4 words written on a sticky note. "I think I know him." Attached was a faded photo of a woman and a young boy standing in front of a laundromat. The boy was unmistakably Eli. The woman, older, thinner than Eli's memory might suggest, but her eyes were the same. William didn't wait. The next morning, he went to the housing center and knocked gently on Eli's door. The boy opened it slowly, blinking sleep from his eyes. "I think we found something," William said. Eli stared at him. "Her. I don't know yet, but we need to check." Eli didn't speak. He just stepped back, grabbed his backpack, and nodded. They walked together down the hall, through the city, toward a possible answer. Not toward closure, perhaps, but toward something even harder. The truth, whatever it might be. They took the train in silence. Eli sat by the window, arms crossed, his forehead pressed against the glass, watching the city pass in blurred fragments. The train moved steadily toward Queens, each stop pulling them closer to the possibility neither of them dared define. William sat beside him, clutching the envelope that contained the letter, the photograph, and a printout of the sender's name and address. He hadn't told Eli the woman's name yet, not because he was hiding anything, but because names, real or not, carried weight. He'd learned that with Eli. Best to show, not tell. Outside, the skies were gray, heavy with clouds. The mood matched the city, neither hopeful nor hopeless. Just waiting. When the train reached their stop, Eli was the first to rise. He didn't ask questions. He didn't slow down. He walked with a determination that surprised William, his small frame weaving through the morning crowd with quiet purpose. The address led them to a low-rise apartment building nestled between a bodega and a shuttered laundromat. The sidewalk was cracked, the stairs chipped at the corners, but there were flower pots on the windowsills, faded but tended to, signs of life. William held the envelope tightly as they climbed the steps. At the 3rd floor, they paused outside apartment 3B. A buzzer sat beside the door, the name card blank. "You ready?" William asked. Eli didn't answer. He just nodded once. William pressed the buzzer. Nothing. He pressed again. A faint shuffling came from within. Then, slowly, the door creaked open. A woman in her late 40s appeared. Her hair was pulled back tightly, and deep lines framed her eyes. She looked tired, but not surprised to see strangers. She said nothing, just waited. "Ms. Lanton?" William asked. She gave a slow nod. "I'm William Hart. You wrote me a letter." Her eyes flicked to the envelope in his hand. She glanced down at Eli, and something in her face shifted. Not recognition. Not quite, but something close. A pull, maybe. A tug of memory. "I saw him once," she said. "Few months ago. Sitting outside the shelter. Thought he looked like a kid I knew." Eli stepped forward. "You knew my mom?" The woman blinked. Her voice softened. "I knew her years ago. Back when we were both staying at a women's housing program near Prospect Park. She had a little boy who wouldn't stop talking about spaceships and peanut butter." "That's you?" Eli nodded slowly. "She called you her star," the woman said. "Said you were going to be bigger than any of this." Eli's throat tightened. "Where is she?" The woman looked down. "I don't know. She stayed with me for a bit when she got sick. Didn't want to go to a hospital. Said they'd take you away if they found her. She left one night and never came back." William stepped in gently. "We're trying to find her. Anything you can remember, names, places she talked about, might help." The woman hesitated, then stepped aside. "Come in." The apartment was small but clean. A single couch, a kitchenette, a stack of neatly folded blankets on the floor. On the coffee table, a chipped mug of tea and a small photo album. She gestured for them to sit. "She used to talk about a place in the Bronx," she said, settling into the armchair. "An old friend who used to run a hair salon there. Said if things got bad, she'd go there." William pulled out his notebook. "Do you remember the name?" "No," the woman said, "but I remember the corner. 3rd Avenue and 149th Street. Little place next to a cell phone store. Might not still be there." Eli sat quietly, processing. Did she say why she left? The woman looked at him. She was scared. But not of you. Of what might happen if someone found her. She thought running would keep you safe. She never stopped loving you. Eli looked away. William placed a hand on his shoulder, then stood. "Thank you," he said. The woman nodded. "If you find her, tell her Nadine still makes the best tea in Queens." Back on the street, Eli didn't speak. He walked quickly, his fists tucked into the sleeves of his hoodie. William followed closely, unsure if he should say anything. After a block, Eli stopped at a street corner and looked up. "She left because she thought it was the only way to protect me," he said. "But she was wrong. I wasn't safe. I was alone." William knelt to his level. "She didn't know that. She made a choice with the information she had. We don't have to agree with it, but we can try to understand it." Eli didn't respond. He just turned and kept walking. They took another train uptown, transferring twice until they reached the Bronx. The corner of 3rd Avenue and 149th Street was loud, full of traffic and movement. Street vendors called out from behind carts. Music blared from a passing car. But the storefronts had changed. Where a salon might have once stood was now a pawn shop and a laundromat. They checked both. Nothing. William started asking around. Store owners, a security guard, a woman sweeping her stoop. Finally, a teenage boy pointed them toward a small church 2 blocks away. "They help a lot of people," he said. "Run meals and stuff. Maybe someone there remembers." The church was quiet inside, the sanctuary dim and cool. A woman, in a denim dress, was organizing pantry items in the back room. She looked up when they entered. "Can I help you?" she asked. "We're looking for someone," William said. "A woman who might have come through here earlier this year. Dark hair, mid-30s. Might have been sick." The woman nodded slowly. "We've seen a lot of people like that. But there was one, came in February. Weak, coughing a lot. She didn't stay. Took some food and left." but she left something behind. She walked to a filing cabinet, rummaged through a box, and pulled out a faded scarf. Said her son gave it to her. Said if she lost it, she'd know she was really gone. Eli stepped forward. "That's hers." His voice cracked. William steadied him. "Do you know where she went?" he asked the woman. "No," she said, "but she asked about shelters that don't ask questions. I gave her a flyer for one near the river. They'd taken people without papers, without names." William's phone buzzed. He glanced at it. A message from the missing persons hotline. "We may have a lead. Call immediately." He looked at Eli. "We're close." Eli didn't speak. He just reached for the scarf, held it to his chest, and nodded. They stood together in the church hallway, beneath the soft light of a stained glass window that cast a mosaic of reds and blues across the floor. It was quiet, but not empty. The kind of quiet that comes just before something breaks open, or something begins. The search wasn't over, but they weren't lost anymore. They were moving, together. They didn't speak much on the ride back into Manhattan. Eli kept the scarf in his lap, folding and unfolding it with slow, deliberate fingers, as if the fabric contained answers he wasn't ready to read. William sat beside him, phone silent in his pocket, eyes on the tunnel lights flickering through the subway windows. He'd returned the hotline call before boarding the train, and though the information was vague, it had been enough to confirm that someone fitting the description of Eli's mother had been processed under an alias at a clinic in Harlem. The details were scarce, no insurance, no ID, only a first name. Camila. The intake note listed signs of respiratory illness, likely untreated, and noted that she'd left before completing her evaluation. No forwarding address. No discharge contact. Just one final remark in the margin. Mentioned a child. Repeated the name Eli. William hadn't told Eli that part yet. They reached the city just after dusk. The streets buzzed with that late evening energy that always seemed to swell just before people disappeared into apartments, restaurants, or night shifts. William bought them both warm food from a corner diner, grilled cheese and soup, no questions asked, and they ate on a bench near the east side, under the soft yellow glow of a cracked street lamp. Eli barely touched the sandwich. "If we don't find her," he said suddenly, "what happens then?" William thought for a moment. "We keep going. Not because we owe it to her, but because we owe it to you." Eli looked down. "Sometimes I wish I didn't care." "I used to wish that too," William said. "But not caring is worse. It leaves you hollow." The next morning, William followed up with the Harlem clinic. After verifying his identity and providing documentation from a hotline team, they allowed him access to file under their community outreach clause. It wasn't much, just a few scribbled notes, a partial address from 3 months earlier, and a referral sheet left unsigned. The address led to a housing complex tucked behind a row of boarded-up shops. The building was weathered, but maintained. They reached the door, buzzed twice, and waited. An elderly man answered, squinting at them through the screen door. "She was here," he said when William asked. Didn't say much. Stayed 2 nights in a friend's unit upstairs. Looked sick, then she vanished. Eli stood beside William, silent. He didn't react anymore when they heard those words. She vanished. Always the same. In and out like smoke, leaving only traces. But then came something different. "She left a bag," the man added. "I didn't know who to give it to. Figured she'd come back." He disappeared into his unit and returned with a worn canvas tote. Eli's breath caught the moment he saw the faded astronaut patch sewn onto the side. "That's hers," he said. Inside were a few items, a small book of poetry, a cracked photo frame, and a single envelope sealed. William stepped aside, letting Eli open it. Inside, written in delicate, careful handwriting, was a letter. "Eli, if you're reading this, it means I was too afraid to stay, and I'm sorry. I thought I could fix things, that I could protect you by running, but I see now that I was wrong. You were always braver than I was. You always saw people, not their money, not their clothes. You saw their hearts. I hope you still do. If someone kind found you, be kind back. Let them help you. Let them stay. I love you more than the stars, more than every light in the sky combined. If I'm still out there, I'll be trying to find my way back. Always, Mom. Eli folded the letter slowly, then held it to his chest. He didn't cry. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes shimmered with something that had been gone for a long time. Recognition, confirmation, proof that he hadn't been forgotten. Do you want to keep looking? William asked gently. Eli nodded. Yeah, but I think I needed this more than I thought. Later that day, back at William's office, now a makeshift base of nonprofit, news broke that sent another ripple through their already shifting world. A prominent journalist had published an expose, not on William, but on Mark Tellers. An anonymous whistleblower had provided documents showing a hidden ledger diverted funds, complete with offshore account details, contract forgeries, and personal correspondences implicating Mark as the sole orchestrator of the financial fraud that destroyed the company. The article painted William not as a co-conspirator, but as a final, manipulated obstacle Mark had removed before disappearing. Eli was in the next room when William read the article. He printed it out, read it twice, then walked to the window and stared out over the skyline. He wasn't smiling. He didn't feel vindicated. Just still. When Eli walked in, he noticed a paper in William's hand. What's that? Justice, William said. Sort of. Eli approached and read the headline. Then he looked at William. Do you feel better? William thought for a long time. No, just cleaner. They spent the rest of the day outlining the next phase of Still Around. Eli, with his backpack slung beside him, drew on the whiteboard with the same seriousness William had once reserved for investor meetings. Only now the stakes were real. Lives, stories, second chances. That night, when William returned to his apartment, he found a small envelope on the floor beneath the door. No name, no return address. Inside, a drawing. 2 stick figures again, one holding a microphone, the other holding a sign that said, "Keep going." And at the bottom, in blocky, uneven handwriting, "You're not the man on the bench anymore. You're the one standing next to it." William placed a drawing next to the first one Eli had ever given him. He understood then that something had shifted, not just in the world around him, but in the way he occupied it. He no longer needed to be rescued, and he no longer needed to disappear. He had been seen, and now it was his turn to make sure no one else like Eli ever went unseen again. The press conference was held in the community room of the Still Around Pilot Center in the Bronx. It wasn't flashy. No stage lighting, no corporate banners. Just a wide, sunlit room with folding chairs arranged in neat rows, and a long table at the front covered in a plain white cloth. Reporters from local and national media outlets packed the space, holding recorders and notepads, murmuring as they waited for the story everyone had been talking about to finally take a new turn. William Hart stepped up to the microphone at exactly 10 o'clock in the morning. He wore a simple navy jacket over an open-collared shirt, no tie, no logos. His demeanor was calm but resolute. Behind him, on a large corkboard, hung drawings from local children, some silly, some surprisingly poignant. In the corner of the board, tacked higher than the others, was Eli's original crayon drawing of the bench. "Thank you for coming," William began, scanning the room. "I won't take much of your time. I'm not here to make a pitch or deliver a rebranding campaign. I'm here to launch a mission." He paused. Still Around is not a charity. It's not a feel-good initiative. It's not about wealthy people donating to make themselves feel better. It's about creating spaces where kids who have been forgotten are not just seen, but heard, trusted, and empowered. He went on to explain how the organization would work. Street-level programs for homeless and at-risk youth, trauma-informed staff trained to listen first and act second, mobile shelters equipped with rest areas and classrooms, city-specific micro-grants for children without documentation or access to services. But the core of it all was the voice of the children themselves. "We won't guess what they need," William said. "We'll ask them, and we'll listen." A journalist raised a hand. "Is the boy real?" she asked. "The one who gave you the sandwich?" William smiled slightly. "Yes, he's real, and he's the reason this exists. Will we ever meet him?" William didn't answer right away. Then he said, "You already have, in the drawings, in the design of this space, in every decision we made. You've met him, even if you don't realize it yet." After the press conference, the video spread quickly. It was shared not just for its message, but for its tone, direct, honest, stripped of the polished attachment that so often accompanied social impact campaigns. Donations poured in, so did offers of partnership. More importantly, volunteers, many of whom had once been street kids themselves, began reaching out. Still Around was no longer a concept. It was a movement, and behind it all, in the quiet, Eli watched from the wings. He had chosen not to attend the press event, not out of fear, but because he wanted the world to see the work first, not the face behind it. He still wasn't sure he was ready to be that visible. But when William returned that afternoon, he found Eli waiting for him in the back room of the center, seated at a desk with a large poster board covered in scribbles. "What's all this?" William asked. "Program idea." Eli said, "You keep talking about mobile shelters, right? What if we had them themed? Like one for art, one for books, one for kids who just need quiet." William leaned over the board, eyebrows raised. "You designed all this?" Eli nodded. "I drew a couple versions. Don't laugh at the squirrel van." William laughed anyway. "You really like squirrels." "They're survivors," Eli said. "They steal, they hide, they watch everything. They're just like us, only fuzzier." William studied the drawings. "These are good, really good. Can I show them to the team?" Eli hesitated. "If I say yes, do I have to talk at the next meeting?" "Only if you want to," William said. Eli considered it. "Maybe." That night, after most of the staff had left, William found Eli in the courtyard behind the building, tossing a baseball against the wall. The scarf from his mother was tied to his backpack now, not hidden away, but carried openly. "You know," Eli said between throws, "it's weird how people listen to you now." William leaned against the wall. "They've always listened. They just didn't always hear." Eli caught the ball, held in his hands. "You ever think she might walk in one day? Just show up." "Every day," William said. "You?" Eli nodded. "Yeah, but now, if she does, I'll have something to show her." The next morning, William received a message that made him pause. A shelter on the edge of Queens had reported a woman who matched Camilla's description. She hadn't given her name, but she'd asked about a program called Still Around. Said she'd heard about it from someone at a food bank. Said she had a son she hoped might be involved. She didn't leave a contact number. She left a message. "Tell them I'm still trying to get there." William read the note twice before walking to Eli's room. The boy was already up, eating toast and flipping through a graphic novel. William sat beside him. "She's close," he said. Eli didn't speak, but his fingers froze on the page. A woman matching her description came to a shelter in Queens. She asked about Still Around. She didn't leave her name, but she said something I think you should hear. William handed over the note. Eli read it once. Then again. "I'm still trying to get there," he whispered. "She's trying." William nodded. "And we'll be here when she does." That afternoon, the center buzzed with new energy. Volunteers organized donations. Staff updated schedules for new programs. A city councilwoman dropped by for a tour. William stepped back from the chaos, watching it unfold, realizing the organization was growing into something independent of his presence. It was becoming exactly what Eli had drawn: many hands, many voices, all connected by the simple idea that no one should be left alone. That evening, at the weekly planning meeting, William set a new chair at the table. Eli walked in with his backpack, placed it down beside the seat, and took his place. He didn't speak right away. He just nodded at the staff members around the table, then opened his notebook. "I have some ideas," he said, and no one interrupted. No one looked past him. They listened, not to a figurehead, not to a mascot, but to a co-founder, and the room changed. Something shifted in that moment. William felt it. Eli felt it. The team felt it. It wasn't about building something for Eli anymore. It was about building something with him. Together, And though the world still hadn't seen his face on television or in headlines, the heart of the movement beat in rhythm with his words, his drawings, and his belief that showing up for someone else, really showing up, could start a chain reaction of healing. Still Around was no longer a story about what happened one morning in Central Park. It was about what came next. And the next chapter was already being written. The morning was quiet, just as it had been on the very first day. Autumn had arrived in full, dusting Central Park with golden leaves and a thin chill that settled on shoulders like a soft reminder of time passing. The same bench, worn now at the edges but still sturdy, sat waiting near the tree line. It hadn't changed, not really. The world around it had, though, and so had the people it once brought together. William Hart stood just off the path, coffee in hand, coat buttoned to the neck. He didn't look like the man who'd once collapsed on that bench, face buried in his hands. He looked present, grounded, a little older in the eyes, maybe, but lighter in posture. His face carried the lines of effort, not regret. Across the clearing, a small van pulled up, not the sleek black sedans William once traveled in, but a white service vehicle branded with the Still Around logo in green and orange. The side read, "Listen first. Act second." The sliding door opened and Eli stepped out. He looked taller now, not physically. He was still the same small-frame boy, but something about him stood straighter. He wore a navy hoodie with a Still Around patch sewn onto the chest and a lanyard with his first name in bold letters. Behind him, a volunteer handed off a box filled with wrapped sandwiches. Eli nodded, then turned and walked toward the bench. William met him halfway. "You remembered," he said. Eli smirked. "It's Friday. You said we'd come back on a Friday." They sat together again, just as they had on the day it all began. For a moment, neither spoke. They watched the squirrels darting through the trees. The city moved around them, but this corner of the park still felt untouched by everything else. She called. Eli said finally, voice steady. William turned toward him, eyebrows raised. "Your mother?" Eli nodded. 3 nights ago, she found a payphone in Jersey. Said she saw a news segment about Still Around. Recognized the name. She didn't believe it at first. Thought maybe someone was playing a trick on her. But then she saw the drawing. William felt something click into place. The bench. The stick figures, Eli added. She said she knew I'd drawn it. Said she remembered that day in the park when we saw a man crying on a bench, and I asked her why he didn't have anyone with him. She told me then, sometimes people don't know how to ask for help. William's eyes welled, but he didn't look away. Where is she now? Still moving. Eli said, she's not ready to come back yet, but she said she's clean and safe and trying. And how did you feel when she said that? Eli didn't answer right away. He looked out across the park. I felt still like maybe I didn't have to run anymore. William nodded. You don't. They sat in silence for a few more minutes. Then Eli reached into his backpack and pulled out 2 sandwiches wrapped in wax paper. Peanut butter, he said, just like the first one. We made a batch this morning with the kitchen team. The new location opens next week. William accepted the sandwich and smiled. I never thought a peanut butter sandwich would change my life. Eli grinned. I did. He handed William a second envelope, this one sealed with tape. I wrote something. Eli said, not a letter, a message for the launch. You don't have to use it, but I thought maybe it would help people understand. William opened it slowly. Inside was a single sentence, printed in Eli's unmistakable handwriting. You cried. I listened. That's how people start healing. William closed the envelope and placed it gently in his pocket. You realize people are going to quote that for decades. Eli shrugged. Let them, as long as they actually do it. The rest of the morning passed slowly. A few joggers passed by. A woman walked her dog and smiled at them. Nothing spectacular happened. No viral moment. No cameras. Just 2 people, a bench, and a memory that had grown into a mission. By noon, they returned to the van. Eli climbed in first, placing his backpack beside him. William paused before closing the door and looked back at the bench once more. It looked smaller now, Or maybe it was just that they'd both outgrown it. Not the meaning, but the weight. As the van pulled away, William checked his messages. Photos were already coming in from still-around locations across the country. A center in Chicago had just opened its mobile tutoring unit. A converted bus in Los Angeles now hosted weekly music therapy sessions. A library corner in Atlanta bore a mural designed by local youth, inspired by a story they'd read online about a boy who gave his only sandwich to a stranger. And in the Bronx, the original center, now expanded, was hosting its first mentorship day. Over 100 children were expected. William was scheduled to speak, but he knew the real speech would come from Eli, and Eli was ready. That evening, in a room filled with folding chairs and rows of kids from every part of the city, Eli took the stage. He didn't have notes. He didn't need them. He stood behind the podium, looked out at the faces waiting, and began. "My name is Eli. Some of you know that already. Some of you don't. But that doesn't matter. What matters is that I see you." He let that sit for a second. A lot of people walk by kids like us. They think we're invisible, or too broken to fix, or too much trouble. But we're not. We're just still around. And sometimes being around is the hardest thing you can do. In the audience, a girl no older than 7 leaned forward. A teenager in the back wiped his face with his sleeve. A staff member near the door wept quietly. Eli continued, "I don't know where my story ends. I don't know if my mom's coming back tomorrow or next year or ever. But I know this: when people stay, when they show up without trying to fix you, something changes." He looked to the side of the room where William stood, arms folded, heart in his throat. "I met someone who stayed," Eli said, "and because he stayed, I got to grow. I got to speak. And now I get to help you speak too." He stepped down to applause, not the polite kind, but the loud, raw kind that comes from recognition, from hope. William met him at the base of the stage. "You were brilliant," he said. "I was honest," Eli replied. The event continued, but William and Eli slipped out early. The night air was crisp. They walked side by side through the city that had once forgotten both of them. No longer strangers. No longer survivors clinging to separate cliffs. Now co-founders. Now friends. Now the proof that the smallest act of kindness could echo in ways neither had imagined. And as they walked toward the subway station, passing under the same flickering lights and cracked sidewalks they once called shelter, Eli looked up and said, "I don't feel invisible anymore." William smiled. "You were never invisible." And this time, Eli believed it. As they descended the stairs, the city swallowed them again, not to hide them, but to carry them forward. And far above, in a quiet corner of Central Park, the bench waited, not empty, just ready.